In this episode of Eco-Eye, we investigate the damage caused by forest fires in Ireland and look at the problems of air quality in Irish towns. Nearly 500,000 people die every year in Europe from the effects of air pollution. 500,000 lives cut short every year. Emissions from traffic, industry and power generation all have a direct impact on air quality and on life expectancy. But the use of smoky coal in homes has a more immediate and visible impact. Since it was banned in Dublin in 1990, 360 lives have been saved every year. This stuff is lethal, and we're burning it in our homes all across Ireland. So what can we do about it, and what are the alternatives? I'm going on the road to find out. Unless we get a blast of foul air right in the face, it's hard to notice the pollutants in the air we breathe in every day. And it can be harder still to make the connection with the state of our health. My first stop is DIT in Kevin Street, Dublin, where Professor Pat Goodman lectures in environmental and medical physics. Pat, what are the pollutants in the air that affect our health?
Well, the primary ones are small, very fine particles. And these particles are a result of combustion processes. So whether you're burning fuels in a car or heating in houses, these are associated with health effects, even at very low levels.
And what sort of diseases can these lead to?
So particles getting into your bloodstream, depending on how many of them there are and so on, can cause damage to the lining of the blood vessels and can lead to strokes, can also trigger heart attacks. With people who have breathing problems, say existing asthma, COPD, exposure to particles in the air can certainly trigger and exacerbate again these illnesses.
Pat studied air quality in 4 mid-sized towns, Letterkenny, Navan, Killarney and Tralee, and found higher than expected pollution levels in winter, mostly from home heating.
Say we take something like smoky coal, and it's certainly one of the worst. But if it's been burned in an open grate, then it's very inefficient for heating the house. We've a lot of heat loss, and we've all the pollutants coming off that burning going up the chimney.
So what's the solution to the smoky coal issue in Ireland?
Well, in my own personal view is I think we should ban smoky coal nationally. We've already done it in a lot of places, so I cannot see the rationale for why it's not a national ban at this stage. But there are people who rely on coal and other solid fuels to heat their houses. So we do need an enlightened and innovative approach to ensure that these people are looked after.
For people living in small towns, are we being fair to them by not having a national ban on smoky coal?
Well, I think we've been very unfair to them. The air quality in some of these smaller towns now is worse than our big cities. So the challenge to us is to improve air quality in smaller towns.
Pat Goodman is in no doubt about the harmful effects of burning smoky coal and the need for a national ban. But what's the view from the Environmental Protection Agency?
When we get into some of the smaller towns, the main source of air pollution is, especially in the winter, is typically from domestic burning of solid fuels. The levels can be quite high, and in some towns we've seen breaches of the short-term air quality standards, particularly in cold parts of the winter time. In the EPA, we are supportive of progressing towards a nationwide ban on the burning of smoky fuel because of the health benefits and the air quality benefits that we've seen over the last 25 years from switches in other towns and cities.
So the scientists and the EPA agree that we need a national ban, yet we still don't have it. While we're waiting for a resolution, what can a typical family do to help themselves? This is Enniscorthy in County Wexford. It's unlikely to get connected to piped natural gas, and like most towns in Ireland, it doesn't have a smoky coal ban. The Nolte family have oil-centred heating and an open fire. I've persuaded them to let us install a wood-burning stove to replace the open fire. Mary, I see you've got an open fire, so why do you want to replace that now with a wood-burning stove?
Well, I suppose of late, just with the economy the way it is, money, cash flow and everything the way it is, we just find we're losing so much heat and therefore money up the chimney. And I find then that we're relying on the oil to heat the radiators for the rest of the house. But because oil has gone so expensive as well, we're rationing it. So you're coming home kind of to a cold house more often than not, trying to keep the kids in here, and they have their little blankies, and it's perfect when fire is lighting. But as soon as you go out into the rest of the house, you're not benefiting. As well as that, then we find to have showers and everything, we're also having to put on the immersion to bump up the water so that there's enough. So you're kind of having the expense three ways: the oil, the coal and the electricity.
And are there problems now with air quality in the area because of this?
More towards the centre of town, if you're driving up the hill, you can see a hazy fog of all the fires burning.
Right, Mary, Conrad, the lads are ready to go. Can I give them the nod?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Eddie, tell us about the wood-burning stove you're fitting here.
Right, it's a Chieftain wood-burning stove which fits into a standard 22 by 16 fireplace. It has a wraparound boiler that will heat up to 10 radiators. This stove will actually eliminate you using your oil boiler. It's a wood-burning stove and the efficiency is 76%. This should heat this house here for about 700 to 800 euros per year. That's heating your whole house, your radiators, hot water and your heat in the room.
So how does this compare now in air quality compared to an open fire with coal?
The air quality, you'd have 1/10 of the pollutants in the atmosphere compared to coal. They have a clean burn system in them which burns the gases the second time. You'll actually have no smoke coming out your chimney.
Bring it up.
Well, Mary, how's the installation going?
Going very well. They're working away. They haven't stopped all day apart from lunch, and they're doing it very quickly and efficiently. There's so little disruption to the whole house. It's amazing, which is a plus.
Are you looking forward to having that?
I cannot wait. I am so looking forward to it. Nearly put on the bikini. Nearly.
Replacing an open fire with a wood-burning stove is a good first step in weaning ourselves off smoky coal. But how do the alternatives stack up?
So from the fuels currently available, we know that coal causes a lot of pollution of the air. We go to things like turf or wood burning. And again, if these are being burnt in an open grate, it's a lot less efficient from a heating perspective. And we also have particles both going into the room where people are burning and also going up the chimney. Oil has similar problems, and we've seen the rising prices of oil, and it's all imported. The only fuel that might reduce the pollution emissions would be something like natural gas, but that's not piped to the whole country. So the challenge for us is to move towards more environmentally friendly fuels. Longer term, we could be looking at maybe district heating systems where we heat a number of houses from one centralised unit. That does take a bit of infrastructure to put in, but it's a win-win long term.
Pat Goodman's study found air quality problems in the 4 towns he monitored. Here in Tralee, they are taking action. Town manager Michael McMahon.
Clearly, for the whole quality of life of the area, for the people that are living in the town and for the people that are visiting the town, it's very important that the quality of the air should be excellent.
So what have you done now to improve air quality in the town?
Well, in the first instance, we have implemented the smoking ban on smoky coal. Up to now, there was a ban on the sale of the coal, but there wasn't a ban on burning it. And the new regulation has, I suppose, closed that loophole.
Here in Tralee, they've introduced one of the most ecological and innovative heating systems in the country. The Tralee District Heating Scheme burns locally grown renewable wood chips to pump heat directly into 100 houses, a community centre, library and school. And it's very clean.
We have optimum burning in it because it operates over 700 degrees, the furnace itself, the boilers. And on the smoke, then we have a cyclone separator that removes any particles from the exhaust. So like the emissions are very, very low. It has 15 times less emission than the common coal-fired systems. At the moment, we are carrying out a feasibility study on the actual heat demand in the town to see how much heat we can supply, because it's expensive to roll out the pipe network throughout the town. But like once it's in, like it's like the gas infrastructure. But the big difference is that we're using locally produced fuel, and like that will create employment. And like we always say, like when we use timber, we keep 80% or 90% of the money within the county, whereas when we're using fossil fuels, 80% of that is going out of the country.
Retrofitting insulation in older homes and replacing open fires with wood stoves are also a feature of the plan in Tralee.
Right, and I see you've got...
Johnny O'Brien and his daughter Holly live near the heating plant. Their house has been heavily insulated to get it ready for district heating.
And you know what? This is an old house here. Look, this is...
The outside insulation was put in there about two years ago. It's like a blanket over the house. So whatever heat is put on in the house, you know, stays in the house. When the district heating does come in, it's going to cost me probably a third less than what I'm actually paying out at the moment now for coal and oil.
Tralee and Kerry County Council are way ahead of the rest of the country in having a coordinated and visionary approach to home heating. And they have big ambitions.
Well, the future is to further extend this unit, like with the houses so well insulated and so forth. It allows us to use the 1 megawatt for a lot bigger area. Our bigger plan then, once we get our studies complete, is to extend the district heat throughout the town.
Back in Enniscorthy, after just 6 hours' work, the new wood stove is up and running. Come on in, Mary. All well.
Oh my Lord.
What do you think?
Very nice. Wow. Look at that.
Oh, now the floor's nice and warm.
Very good. So just think of it, you may never be using your oil boiler again. And probably never have coal in this house again. That's a real win, isn't it?
That is. No, we don't need coal anymore.
Let's just throw it in the bin.
Yeah.
Right?
The Nulty family are thrilled with their new Tipperary-made Baru stove. And by using locally grown fuel, their energy bills will be a lot smaller and the money will stay in Ireland. The people of Tralee can look forward to cheaper, cleaner and renewable home heating that keeps money and jobs in their area. Two sensible solutions on vastly different scales.
It's obvious that there's no magic solution for heating to improve air quality. What we need is an integrated, creative and ecological strategy that includes measures at all levels.
We should start by banning smoky coal, then develop locally focused, sustainable schemes for energy-efficient home heating. The people of Tralee have the will and the leadership to do it. When will the rest of the country catch up? In March 2011, Ireland was shocked by images of the wildfire that took hold of Quilcha plantations in Donegal, destroying thousands of acres of forests and wildlife habitats. Strong winds and dry conditions spread the fire faster than anyone could have guessed. More than 50 troops with specialist equipment were called in to join the fire service, and 3 Air Corps helicopters were dispatched to try and bring the fire under control. Suddenly, Ireland had joined countries like Australia and Portugal that needed strategies to deal with fire disasters. Today, I'm going to find out the costs of Ireland's forest fires and meet the people on the front line. In 2012, firefighters throughout Kerry were mobilised when a gorse fire threatened the ancient oak woods of the Killarney National Park. Not only lives, forestry and wildlife were at stake this time, but also a valuable tourism industry, worth millions to the local community. Thousands of tourist beds are sold every year to visitors hoping to catch a glimpse of the stunning wildlife in one of our oldest sessile oak woodlands. I went high into the Sheehy Mountains to meet Park Ranger Kieran Nugent to find out what went wrong and if there was anything that could be done to stop it happening again.
Hi Kieran, good to see you. Lovely, beautiful place here, isn't it?
Another beautiful day in Kerry.
Yeah, it's great,
Good. Yeah.
Absolutely. So tell me what happened up here.
I suppose back in March last year, at the end of the heat wave, we had a major fire incident here, wildfire, involving a very extensive area of open land, and the fire covered about 500 acres inside of 2 hours.
500 acres?
Pretty much, yeah, in a few hours. So that would be quite a typical incident in spring in Ireland. And what people have to realise is that in Ireland, just in the same way as they have in Canada or in America, we have a wildfire season here, and that can cause problems for people managing land, can cause problems for local residents living beside fire-prone areas. We need to be very careful in this country. We need to start learning the habits of countries that have major fire problems, and that's something that in our department we've been trying to help people to do. The more fuel you have, the more intense and the more dangerous the fire incident is going to be.
So when you talk about fuel, what do you mean by fuel?
We mean dry and dead vegetation. And if you look around us here at the types of vegetation, the gorse, the heather, the Molinia grass, nardus, some of the mosses, these are generally dead during the winter. They go senescent and they lose their nutrients, they lose their green, and they're capable of drying out very, very quickly. And when we get our spring weather patterns, we're talking about northerly winds, we're talking about easterly winds, they're very, very dry, and they're capable of drying this material down to a highly flammable state very, very quickly. And because these types of fine, they have a very large surface area, they burn incredibly intensely when under the right conditions.
With climate change accelerating, we now live with conditions that will make these fires not only possible, but very likely. I was invited up the Mangerton Mountain to meet firefighter Mike Flynn, who is part of Kerry's first response team. The fire had come within feet of a major forest in the national park. Local news suggested the fire may have been started deliberately. Mike had agreed to show me how far the fire had spread before they brought it under control.
Mike, the last time you were called up here, what was it like?
Well, this area here would be actually one of our hot spots for wildfires in Kerry. The last time we were up here now, we had a serious fire involving, we had about 8 fire engines, 3 or 4 jeeps, about 35 firefighters all working in this one area.
Oh, this area? Yeah.
Yes, just to contain one fire here.
Really?
You have a number of properties inside over there that need protecting. You have another 6 or 7 houses at the end of the road. So our initial assessment is to go to these people and make sure they're safe in their homes and protect their homes. You have large fire fronts, a couple of 100 metres long, travelling towards the national park. So we have to set up a defensive perimeter here to hold the fire back from entering the national park. We'll be bringing in fire brigades from maybe Killoughlin, Kinmare. We've often brought them in from Cork as far as Macroom, have to back us up.
And across the whole now, Kerry, would you have a lot of these problems?
20-25% of our calls a year would be gorse fires. Now I'd include bog fires, mountain fires, forestry, all that burning under the wildfire category. The fire service is aware that something has to be done about the fuel that's on the mountains, because as it builds up over time, it's just creating a larger and larger problem when a fire does start there. So we'd prefer to see it be managed.
Looking at the landscape through Mike's eyes, I was amazed to see how unmanaged vegetation can build up and how quickly conditions can change to turn it into a vast stockpile of fuel.
I'm on the foothills here of Mangerton Mountain in Killarney, and this is exactly what we've been talking about. We've got vegetation here that's all overgrown. And look at this gorse, all dry, tender, full of oil, very flammable. This is ready to burn.
The environmental impact of forest fires is obviously devastating, but there are social consequences too. Many of us don't realise the risks we are running. Kieran was keen to point out that responsibility for fire prevention was shared throughout the community and with visitors to the area.
The sources of ignition we see in reports, people littering, we see people out burning and associated with agriculture, we see people, most worrying of all, maliciously lighting fires and setting fires deliberately. And we saw some of that in the recent past. It doesn't really matter where the source of ignition comes from.
Sometimes farmers have to do it to keep their vegetation controlled, don't they?
Absolutely.
Is that not an issue too?
It is, and burning of vegetation is a traditional practice, and it's an accepted practice. There's a legal framework for to do it.
When do you burn?
Again, burning has traditionally been carried out during the winter months and during the early spring, when conditions are available, suitable conditions are available. And farmers would have gone out in spring, typically in February and March, to burn in the past.
The Forest Service Code of Practice offers farmers easy-to-follow guidelines on when and how to burn.
When you have areas burned over, as in Donegal in 2011, at the scale that it's been burned over, you have to assume that there's been significant, not only to birds, but to the actual structure of the habitat remaining. If fires are too hot, they'll kill the heather. If you have a bird species like grouse that depends on heather for all of its food requirements, for all of its shelter requirements, if the heather's gone, the habitat opportunities and the breeding opportunities for those birds are gone with it. The fire themselves isn't the issue. I would view that the fire is simply a symptom of a wider set of issues. The fire is probably the most visible issue.
So what's the fundamental issue here?
The fundamental issue is how we manage our uplands and how we manage the vegetation and how we balance all of the different demands, the demand for conservation against the need to farm in these uplands and the need to structure our farming that it lends itself to conservation.
Is there a fundamental problem here for farmers?
One of the fundamental problems is that some types of upland farming simply hasn't been viable, and there are now no farmers doing it. So not only have we less sheep, in some parts, when you go up the west coast, in parts of Mayo and parts of Donegal, there's actually no farmers. There's less farmers there now than there were 30 years ago. And this is a fundamental problem because when you're dealing with commonage, you're dealing with vast, vast areas of land, and you need to have people out there managing. It's tough work. You need to have a lot of people there to cooperate together on these commonages to manage them properly.
Farming in areas like this is tough work, and there are not many farmers who could afford to take it on. Kieran suggested I talk to Patrick and his son Pádraig. In the past, they'd grazed cattle on the uplands, and I wanted to know if they would consider reintroducing the practice.
So how can farmers be helped now to manage their uplands so that we don't get more of these fires?
Yeah. We need some farmer support to actively graze these lands, you know, because if they're not grazed on a regular basis, they become overgrown and they become a fire risk. And like farmers are passionate about what they do, but we need some farmer support. What we'd really like to use it for is maybe more grazing or even graze more traditional type animals on it.
Okay, so you're saying that if they were the right species and there was the right kind of incentive for these cattle and maybe sheep too, hardy sheep too,
as well, yeah.
Local sheep, mountain sheep,
yeah.
And if the right, you would be interested in grazing these more all year round.
Yeah, all year round, and it'd be like sustainable grazing. You wouldn't be damaging the habitat. You'd actually be improving it by having some form of grazing on it.
Kieran took me back to the spot where the 2012 fire had started. On the way, we passed through the grasslands that had grown back over the scorched earth. As the countryside regained its covering, to the casual observer, it was almost as if the fire had never been there. And right there lay the real danger. It's easy to forget fires like the one in 2012, once the vegetation has grown back. With climate change bringing new weather patterns and people living closer to our big forests, what we need now more than ever is vigilance.
Kieran, you're at the forefront of all of these problems. What would you like to see done?
The critical issue here is in one of coordination. It's coordination between the state agencies concerned and, most importantly, coordination of local people at local level. What it really requires are residents to ensure that their homes are safe, that their elderly neighbours are taken care of in terms of fire, and for people to be aware of the dangers of certain types of vegetation and allowing that vegetation to accumulate in and around where they're living. Our usual mantra is to be prepared, to be vigilant, and to help prevent forest fires. And it's not just about the forest, it's about communities in a lot of these areas.